Hello and welcome to School to Startup, interview series where we dive into what it really takes to help students become founders. I'm your host, Tanushi Karanwal, and today we have someone incredibly special with us. Joining me is Professor Chengwei Liu, Associate Professor of Strategy and Behavioral Science at Imperial College London, and the author of The Rise of Luck and Success. His work challenges the myths we tell ourselves about merit, about success, about skills, and how we build systems that often often reward randomness. So, Professor Liu, welcome to the show, to the series. It's an absolute honor to have you.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Tanushi, for inviting me. I'm really happy to share my experience with you.
So let's directly dive into it. Let's start with the big one.
It's a very profound question, right? So I think a lot of my arguments are really focusing on this, the most successful firm or the richest people, and the role of luck or being at the right place at the right time definitely play a much more important role than many people would like to think in allowing their exceptional successes. But I think the implication for students or for younger generation may be slightly different because we're really focusing on this good to great. So if you're already kind of good and moving to great, there's a very little rule you can follow. There's no rule for the riches, as people say, right? And the randomness or luck play a much more important role. But if you're like a young person and you're not experienced yet, how to kind of develop your skill and become good enough so that you can benefit from this being at the right place at the right time. Randomness actually play much less role. Skill and effort still is very important. So you need to specialize and develop your skill and to be known for something. And that is still very important to be competent and so that you can benefit from luck later on, right? So put it differently, of course, the socioeconomic status, for example, where you're born, which kind of country, that is a luck component. You can't change much. And sadly, sometimes it determine like more than 50% of your life achievement. But you can still focus on the controllable, right? So even just like less than 50%, say 30%, 40% of the thing that's within your control, then that is something you should focus on. Try to manage the controllable and not really try to think about the luck component too much. That is already determined that you cannot do much about it. Behaviorally or psychologically, that is very understandable, right? So particularly for high achiever, excellent student, you probably have a very strong record in the past. Then, experience failure, particularly thinking about entrepreneurship, starting your own firm or trying a different idea, that is very risky, right? We all kind of fear about the failure. That is really understandable. But sometimes I advise like a venture capitalist in selecting startup, and some of the exchange made us all conclude that sometimes when we select this viable entrepreneur, actually we try to avoid this impeccable CV. So if you have achieved all the success in the past, actually we give less weight to this type of possible founders. And the reason is that if you have a very perfect CV, he almost suggests that you never try anything new or leave your comfort zone. And that is not encouraging from a VC perspective, because when you try new things, you're going to experience a lot of frustration, failure, uncertainty, setback. So that kind of psychological preparedness is also very important. And when we look for potential founder, whether to invest, actually that aspect of psychological preparedness is pretty important as well. So that's kind of what we advise some of the VC in their selection. And back to your question, of course, then you should be cautious, right? So even you have your fear about the failure, but you should really try your best to leave your comfort zone and build your CV. And of course, you may experience failure, but how to frame it as a useful lesson learned. I think telling a story, sharing a story from your failure, that can sometimes impress your potential audience, investor, and so on and so forth more compared to having a perfect CV. Fascinating perspective, right? And I usually teach the idea that there's less to learn from success, but more to learn from failures. So what you say is absolutely correct. We have a lot to learn from failure, but the question is how, right? So of course, my experience, I was a consultant before, but then in the past 15 to 20 years, I was in academia, right? I've trained as a PhD student for 4 or 5 years, and as a faculty from junior to tenured professor now. And so a lot of my failure experiences actually happened in academia. So as you said, I mean, measuring this progress is really important. Like if you submit a paper, when you submit it, of course, you have a very high hope. You believe that is the best academic paper in the world and everyone should like it. But then, of course, you got a rejection. It's very emotionally, you feel very bad about it. But so usually the first thing I recommend junior scholar is that if you heard any rejection or failure, just live it for 1 week. Don't do anything about it. Just let your emotion kind of goes away. And then you can kind of evaluate the feedback you receive more with less bias or with less interference with your emotion. I think this applies to a lot of different contexts as well, because your first reaction usually is that you believe your business idea is great. How could anyone kind of dislike it?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, and then all the feedback you kind of just take it too seriously, or you just take it as a personal attack. But sometimes people try to help. People try to give you the critical and the sincere feedback, but you may not take it well during that moment, right? So just let it go and calm down for a week. Yeah, this is a marathon. Most of the kind of competition or entrepreneurship development, right, in academia as well, it's like if you want to develop business, it's not about like a 1 week difference will make any changes. It's like a 1 year, 3 years, 5 years time. So just pause for a week, and then really responding and reflecting on the feedback and how you could have done better, or at least even some of the feedback may not be that constructive, but think from their perspective, how you can do better to persuade them that give you another opportunity or whatever to address their pain points or concerns. So that would be a really useful way to learn from failure or just setback or negative feedback. And if you continue doing that, not just one occasion, but like every week, every month, every quarter, every year, then of course in the learning race compared to between you and the competitor, then you're definitely far ahead, and that can predict long-term success for sure. The validation, of course, is really important. So when I teach entrepreneurship, usually in the literature now it's called a science-based entrepreneurship, right? So you have a business idea, but then you need to evaluate your idea as if you're a scientist. So come up with hypothesis, collect data, and run some regression or whatever statistical method, so that you understand whether the market is there, whether the customer is there, and then the fitness between your product and the market, right? That's very important. But I think the question you asked actually is usually I emphasize before teaching this science-based approach. Because if you want to be a successful entrepreneur and you kind of understand what is the necessary condition about that, usually they come up with an idea that is surprising and contrarian, and no one has thought about that. And then by definition, if you have that contrarian idea, there will not be a lot of data out there for you to examine in the first place. So if you start with the scientific approach, that's very dangerous, because most of the contrarian idea, then you will conclude that it's not going anywhere. So using all this tool, all this scientific approach, that actually can backfire. Instead, you should come up with your own contrarian idea, saying that, well, what is the taking for granted thing people thinking about? And then you try to come up with, well, there's something very different, the unconventional wisdom. And then translating that into a specific problem, if you can solve, then your contrarian belief will become true. Then the scientific approach comes in. And very importantly, the qualitative different approach here is that you need to generate your own data, not just like taking the shortcut using the data out there, right? You need to run your own experiment and getting the unique data so that you have this extra knowledge compare your competitor about the unique proposal or contrarian belief you have. And that is the useful connection to the scientific approach. So that is the whole kind of entrepreneurship education program I'm doing. Both are necessary. Oh, that's a very profound question, probably above my pay scale. If I knew that, I would probably be a college president or whatever. Very difficult question and related to, of course, all this generative AI or technology available, right? So the role, the function of university can be very different, I don't know, in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, or even sooner. Because a lot of a traditional way of like lecturing, this one directional lectures, become almost like a redundant, right? So you can acquire all this knowledge from the internet before, and now generative AI like ChatGPT can actually be a very good teacher. If you ask the right question, the right prompt, you can get to the frontier of knowledge, invest some time very quickly. So that substitute a lot of a traditional function of university. But I think just like the big topic about how humans should work with AI to get the best outcome, I think university should probably really engage in the new technology and then try to tailor make. It's really an opportunity for university to individualize all this learning for the student, right? So depending on the student's interest, their background, and you can direct them to which kind of specialized area that the students should get more knowledge. And this is consistent with this big topic about human and AI interaction, right? So because if you think about the generic skills and the speed of completing the generic task, humans are not going to outperform AI. AI are going to do much better on many of these generic tasks. So for humans, or for the younger generation to maintain the value for being a human, specialization is really important and going really in depth for some domain. And that is how you differentiate from AI, and then this complementary synergy can be created, right? But which area to specialize? Because if everyone specialize the same thing, then it's not called specialization. And then how to allow each student to find the area that specialized to and fitting their own interests and background and so on and so forth. I think university can really play an important role and combine with all this AI and the knowledge pool out there. So I think that will be my ambition or my vision for how the university should evolve too in the next few years.
I think talking about this and actually putting words to all of these problems really solves a lot of things. I think the audience that is watching us will be able to take out certain insights out of it. And it has been a lovely and a great pleasure talking to you, sir.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks to the audience also who is watching us. And we'll be back with another session with another topic for you to help within school to start up interview series with the academicians across the world. Thank you, everyone. So what did we really learn today? That success isn't always about having a perfect plan. Sometimes it's just recognizing the role of luck, being okay with uncertainty, and learning to keep going when outcome doesn't look like a win. That failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a part of process. And most importantly, that universities shouldn't just produce perfect resumes. They should create spaces for imperfect experiments, for messy first tries, and for some of the bold second chances. Whether you're a student with an idea, a professor who is guiding one, or someone who is still figuring out, remember this. Fear of failure kills more startups than the failure itself ever could. And if you're looking for where to start, don't wait for that perfect moment. Start exploring, start asking the better questions, start looking at the problem not from an emotional level, but calming yourself down and looking at it from a different POV altogether. Start using tools like Tracxn, probably any of the tool that you feel like. Start early and let data fuel your curiosity. That was Professor Chengwei Liu with us We thank him for sharing his research, his stories, and his wisdom. And everyone listening here, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Let's build a future where we don't just chase success, we design better experiments. This is School to Startup. I am Tanushi Karanwal. I'll see you in the next episode.